Okay. Testing 1, 2. I hope the mic is working. We'll try again. Okay. So, just a reminder, if you didn't hear me before, next week's class will be on Wednesday, and because in connection to Thanksgiving. Okay, let's start again. These are the descendants of Isaac, the son of Abraham. Isaac gave birth to Abraham. Now, if I tell you that Isaac is the son of Abraham, obviously Abraham gave birth to Isaac, or father Isaac, however you want to say it. So the obvious question is, why repeat yourself? So the simple answer is that Abraham, the history of Isaac, the future history of Isaac, why? Because he was fathered by Abraham, as we shall see. Now, Isaac was different than Abraham in many ways. Abraham was a pioneer in his field as the first Jew. He had a bris at the age of 99. He had he recognized God at a younger age. We'll get into that soon. And many of the kind of life cycle events that a Jew goes through were not applicable to Abraham. Isaac, however, is the first one to have a bris at the age of 8 days old. Isaac is the first one to have a bar mitzvah, as we'll see soon. Isaac is the first wedding recorded in the Torah, is that of Isaac, not of Abraham. So let's get into it. In this week's parsha, one of the things that is mentioned is a special meal that Abraham hosted, a special party that Abraham hosted for an occasion in connection to Isaac. So the question is, what is this special meal? This special meal is the debate amongst the rabbis. Some say that it was his bris. It was a special meal in connection to Isaac's bris. Some say that it was a special meal in connection to his bar mitzvah, which is obviously at the age of 8 days or 13. Now, like we said, Abraham did not have any of these opportunities. Abraham recognized God either at the age of 3 or the age of 40 or the age of 48, depending on which medrash you look in. And obviously, in some level, he recognized God in a deeper, more meaningful way as he aged, versus Isaac is getting this at a much younger age, 8, 13, versus Abraham is 8 days old, 8 days old and 13 years old. So versus Abraham had 3, 40, and 48, a much different kind of journey than his son did. So at this great party, as we'll get back to, the Medrash says that that Abraham invited all the great people of that generation, including many royalty, kings, simply regular kings. One of the kings that he invited was Og the giant. Og was a giant who, according to the Medrash, survived the flood by holding on to the teva. At any rate, he was involved in the wars of the 4 kings versus the 5 kings. He was involved in that. He was one of the kings. And he was invited to this party. And the party, it says, the Torah tells us that this boy grew up and he was weaned. Vayas Avraham Mishtagado. Avraham made a great feast. B'yom higamel Yitzchak, on the day that Isaac was weaned. And the word higamel can also be hinting to the fact that it was his bris. Higamel is Hey Gimel, is the numerical value of 8, meaning 8 days, and Mel is like Mila, from the word Mila. So at any rate, that would seem to suggest that this was in fact his bris. And in fact, this is where the custom of having a meal party at a bris is based on this Medrash says, and therefore it's a good thing. And King David mentions this as well, that this is a special occasion of a bris. Now, the Medrash records a conversation that took place at this party, whichever it was, a bris or a bar mitzvah. And he says, and everyone says to Og, he said to Og, didn't you say that Abraham will never have children, will not have descendants? And you said he was, in fact, the exact language is a barren mule who cannot father children. So Og said, nah, this kid, Isaac, I could crush him with my finger. So God, it says that God said, you're mocking this gift that I gave to Abraham. You will see that out of Isaac's descendants, your end will be in their hands. And we see later in the book of, I believe in Deuteronomy, don't quote me on that, I don't have it in front of me, that God says to Moses, do not fear him, do not fear Og, for I have placed him in your hands. Again, this is a reference to this earlier story that Og's downfall was destined to be by Moses' hands. Moses gets a stick, he jumps up, he smacks Og's ankle, he topples over, and apparently it was a very far fall, and he died. So the question is, if you say that this was a bris, this is a very interesting conversation to have at a bris, right? Hey, you said that guy would never have children. Here he is, his child's bris. You were proven wrong. So this conversation goes on. But if you're going to say that this was, in fact, a bar mitzvah, it doesn't really make sense. Showing up 13 years later and you're talking about his birth, it's a little late to discuss this. So let's dive into this conversation a little deeper, because we're going to see that this is not just some sort of like, hey, he didn't have children, he did have children. There's something a little more deeper going on. So the question is, a bar mitzvah boy, he's 13 years old, maybe ages of maturity have changed, but no matter how you slice it, he's a young boy, a young kid, and he's going to accept upon himself to study Torah and do mitzvahs, and he has all the obligations from a Torah perspective as an adult. So how is he going to get this energy and the strength to actually do the Torah and do these mitzvahs and to follow everything? So the Torah tells us this conversation. Og is saying, listen, there's not going to be any continuation of Abraham. Abraham is his spiritual path is something that only he can do. It can't be passed on to the youth. The youth have their own way. They're busy with whatever young people are doing. This is not something that you can teach. So therefore, he says that Abraham cannot father children. There is no continuity to the path of Abraham, right? Og says, what's the true path? The true path is of strength, physical strength. And in fact, in Deuteronomy, it says that Og was from, it says that Og had a cradle made of iron. Why was his cradle made of iron? So the commentaries explain. Og's cradle was made of iron because he was such a large child that when he would jump on his cradle, it would break. It was made of wood, so it would break. So they made him a cradle of iron. And in fact, in his hometown of the children of Amnon made some sort of museum, and they displayed this cradle to show the strength. What does it mean his cradle was made of iron? Was in fact that Og's cradle, his defining principle, as metaphorically, his defining principle is represented by this cradle, was physical brute strength. And therefore, only things that are related to strength and logic and physical prowess make sense. So for example, Og was the one who suggested to Abraham in the War of the 4 Kings versus the 5 Kings that Abraham should rescue his nephew Lot. Why? Because it's a very logical thing. Your nephew is your flesh and blood, and therefore you're obligated to save him. But any mitzvah that doesn't make sense, for example, a bris milah, it doesn't really make any sense. Why would you do something like that? It's not logical. So again, Og's cradle, his basic principle was that of brute strength and that of logic. He worshipped the mind and the body, really the body and the mind as part of the body. So he said, because that's the only thing that's going to last, right? That it's a survival of the fittest, and whoever is stronger in body and mind will conquer the other. So Og says about Isaac, listen, so Abraham had a child, Isaac. Very cool, very nice. What's going to happen? I'm stronger than him. See, he has no continuity. Abraham's way, Abraham's achievements are all going to fall by the wayside. So what does God say? What is his answer? That in fact, what is the true strength? True strength is not just physical strength, but there has to be meaning. There has to be faith. That is the foundation. Spirituality is the foundation for physical strength. We're not just animals that just eat each other up, then the bigger one eats the smaller one. rather us as human beings. This isn't a spiritual or religious concept, but a basic psychological reality of the world, that the way we could overcome is not and last is not just through brute strength or or wit, but rather through having meaning, purpose, spiritual realities. That's what propels us forward. And in fact, Og's downfall was specifically through. Og was not killed by some sort of spiritual thing, right? We have later in the Bible, we have the town of Jericho. Jericho is a physical place, and Joshua surrounds it. He goes around 7 times, blows a shofar, wonderful, and the walls come down, and they conquer Jericho. It's not what happened with Og. Moses took a stick and he hit him, and he killed him. It's that simple. Now, obviously, it was a miracle. And anything that we experience is a miracle in that way, but it was physical strength that came over. Why? Because God wanted to show Og that Og's path of brute physical strength was not enough, and that actually physical strength comes from our spiritual strength, from our purpose and our meaning in life. That's what gives us the physical strength and force that we're able to overcome. So when it comes to the Jewish people, whenever we and that's the message to the bar mitzvah boy, going back, right? So Og is sitting there and he sees this young bar mitzvah boy, and Og is saying about Isaac, listen, Isaac, he's really nice, and he's even his bar mitzvah, he's speaking the words of Abraham. He's saying his father prepared him a nice speech, I'm sure. Isaac was no slouch in Torah study. I'm sure he prepared and said wonderful things, and all the kings are there, and they say to Og, listen, you were wrong. He says, no, listen, he's really under the influence of his father. He is his father's son, right? He's been educated by Abraham, but this is once he is out of the house, right? And he goes out and he's on his own, it's all over. All bets are off, and I will crush him because I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm stronger, whatever it may be. But the truth is, like we saw in the end, that Og fell by the hands of Moses, the descendant, not just physically, but spiritually of Isaac, that through his spirit and his strength and his physical strength was strengthened, and he was able to overcome Og. And by the way, this is something it's in the sports psychology, not that I'm a psychologist or know much about the sports psychology, but you see many times that the stronger, more physically athletic team does not always win. Sometimes the team that's more mentally locked in and finds purpose and meaning in their play could actually overcome whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, could overcome a stronger opponent by working together, by having a purpose or meaning or some motivation that could be, this is something, just a fact of life. So when it comes to the fact that the Jewish people are oppressed and the Jewish people find themselves in a terrible situation, what is the message that we have, like we are today? Is that actually the way for us to overcome, to have physical strength, to overcome physical problems, material problems in this world, is through being more Jewish, by being proud to be Jewish, by being involved in our spiritual pursuits, our religious pursuits. And again, this is what gives us strength to be Jewish, not just in times of crisis, but all year round. Because that's the problem. The Jewish people, you say to them, listen, you got to be Jewish. You got to show up to shul. You got to do all these mitzvahs, whatever it may be. You got to do it 365 days a year, not just when we're spiritually charged up. How am I supposed to overcome the world, whatever's going on, and all the craziness of the world? How am I supposed to overcome that? And the truth is, your physical, material needs are met specifically by being involved in spiritual pursuits. And that is what it means that Abraham is the father of Isaac, not just because we have our spiritual strength comes from the fact that we are the children of Abraham, that we follow in his way in spiritual pursuits, and not just being involved in physical, mundane things. Because in the way of the world, the stronger could beat the weak. It only works so far. We've seen throughout the generations, all the people who came up against the Jewish people, eventually somebody bigger comes. Right? Eventually, using the sports metaphor, somebody figures out a better way to beat this team. They say they find the flaw, and the team that nobody could beat is beaten. And that's what happens in every generation. Somebody comes and they become the strongest, and eventually they're gone. But the Jewish people survive not because of our physical strength, because It's not necessarily true as far as our physical strength, but we could beat people physically. We could overcome physical and material struggles and crises through our spiritual pursuits. That's what keeps us strong. That's what keeps us physically strong. That's what keeps us emotionally strong. That's what keeps us psychologically strong, is the fact that we have purpose. We have meaning. We have given a mission on this earth to be the children of Abraham. We want to wish you, everybody, a good Shabbos and have a wonderful week, and looking forward to seeing everybody on Wednesday night, God willing. Again, in connection to Thanksgiving, we're going to be doing our class on Wednesday night. All the best. Have a good Shabbos.